you guys are far away from here.
Yeah, we are pretty down. We're pretty
That's
low. We're
okay.
pretty south.
The most awesome thing is, something that came out of COVID that was good was doing stuff on Zoom, and suddenly I'm judging and doing programs all over the country, and that's awesome because I do still work, so I don't, I can't try, I don't travel to do these types of things. I travel for photography, but not to do programs and presentations. So this is great because I get to judge and I get to talk to people in all over the country. So I love that part of this. So I'm going to share my screen and tell me if you can see it. You should
Yes,
be
we
able to see
can.
it.
Yes,
Yes. And you could hear me okay?
yes.
Okay. So I'll stop every few slides for questions. Um, just tell me if I'm talking too fast or too slow. And we could adjust. Feel free to, if you want to say something, feel free to just jump in and we could say something. But I will stop every 5 or 10 slides um, to ask some questions or to discuss certain things. I shared my website in the chat if you want to look at my pictures, um, because as I explain as I go through this, I don't always think all the pictures I put in like a program like this are my best pictures. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that in a few minutes when we start talking about these camera club competitions that we're all so interested in. Before I go further, are there any people who really haven't competed? Is there anybody here tonight who hasn't competed or really hasn't been involved in a camera club competition? Most of you have,
Yeah, go.
for the most part? Okay.
I think we're pretty good. Everybody's at
Okay.
least tried it once.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So, the bottom line before we get too much into the meat of this, I've seen some ugly things stem out of camera club competitions. I've seen fights, I've seen friendships lost. I mean, we had an incident about 10 years ago where the one guy in the parking lot tried to run the judge over with his car.
Whoa.
I don't know if you guys do ribbons, but a lot of the clubs around here do ribbons. And, the ribbons probably cost between, 35 and 60 cents. And is
Yeah.
it really worth running somebody over with their car for a 60-cent ribbon? I don't really think so. So we're going to start at the beginning and we're going to talk about some considerations. Why do you compete? What can competition do for you? Do you have the right personality for it or can it hurt you? I don't want to brag, but when I joined early 2000s, I joined the camera club. I started getting really hardcore back into photography. And after watching for a little bit, I think that I figured the formula out. I'm like, I know how to win these things. I know how these judges are I know what they're looking for. And I did really, really, really well. I just kept winning. And people were like, how on earth are you winning all the time? And, the thing that happened is I figured out the formula. I just figured out, what exactly these judges were looking for. And no matter where I judge, what clubs I judge, who I judge with, and I've judged all over the country. I've actually, have judged internationally. There's a lot of the same things that are looked for in judging competitions. Whether you like it or not, most judges are going to judge you on the technical aspect of your pictures rather than the true artistic wow factor of pictures. Because the true artistic wow factor part of your pictures, it's too subjective. If I just judge based on what I like, it's just too subjective. It's very hard. So we have to go back to the objective stuff and things that we could see black and white. And that's really what we're going to talk about tonight. So here's something else. I love this slide. We won't spend too much time on it, but A lot of times what happens is this. You know, you join the camera club for a specific reason. At some point in your life, whether you've been in the club for a year or whether you've been in the club for 30 years, at some point in your life, somebody probably said you take good pictures, right? Somebody said you have a good eye, or you put pictures on social media, or you show pictures to your friends, and somebody says, wow, you take really good pictures. So then at some point you said, hey, there's this camera club. Maybe I should join the camera club and get a little bit better. And what happens is, if you look at the left top of the chart, it talks about creative skills. So usually you come into the camera club, you have these really high creative skills. Maybe you're not using a fancy camera, maybe you're using a point and shoot or your phone or something like that. And all of a sudden, you start putting your pictures into competition. And the judge is talking about, you know, this isn't in focus. You should be using a different f-stop. You should be using a different shutter speed. This spot in the back is bright and everything. And all of a sudden, you're out taking pictures and all you're thinking about is this technical stuff. And suddenly, your technical skills are getting better, but your creative skills are getting worse. And this has happened to so many people I've spoken to. And it's like, I joined the camera club, all my creative skills are gone because all I'm worried about is, you know, do I have the right settings? Am I in the right position? Did I frame it right? Blah, 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 blah. But what happens at that point is eventually your creative skills and your technical skills come together. Okay? At that point, I call it, you now have your black belt. You don't want to be thinking about technical stuff when you're taking pictures. You want to be thinking creative. But in order to do that, you need to know those technical skills upside down, inside out, and backwards. Like walking, like driving your car. I'm not thinking, okay, I have to press on the gas now. Okay, I have to press on the brake. It just happens. That's what has to happen with your camera to really express yourself in photography. Okay? A really good start for that is in a camera club when people are criticizing or critiquing your images. Now, as a general rule, as you start to bring your creative and technical skills together and you start being able to express yourself, your photography usually gets better. And that's followed along with positive image critiquing, positive judging. There's the few people that it comes together and just not working for you. And here I have the bottom right. You know, you think you're there, but you know, you still get negative image critique, negative judging. It leads to a lot of insecurity. I want to say right off the bat, if you are in this spot, you need to take a break from competing in camera club photography. You need to go out there with a lens and you need to start taking pictures and enjoying photography the way you did when you came into the camera club. And then sort of revisit this camera club stuff again at another point, because there could be nothing worse. I've spoken to people who are good photographers and man, they put these pictures in competition and they just keep getting slammed. And those people have to go back and they have to stop. They have to look at their technical skills and then get their confidence back up. But for the most part, most people that I see in camera clubs, man, when this creative and technical skills comes together, that's when they explode. That's when you look at their pictures and say, wow. So sort of, I want you to tell you a couple things. A judge essentially has 5-10 seconds to make a decision. That's in the live competitions. Your competition, you send the pictures. I just found that out tonight. You send the pictures for the judge to look at. This was the first picture I ever put in a photography competition. And I was new to the camera club. I really didn't figure out any kind of formula yet. I put this picture in. I thought it was the greatest picture in the world. I said, look, you know, got some nice motion in the water, some nice colors. And I got this thing hanging here that kind of acts as a leading line. I put it in the competition. The judge looks at it. He's like, what the heck is this huge distraction in the middle of the picture? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this judge doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. That looks really cool. I looked at it a couple of days later, and I was like, what the heck is this huge distraction in the middle of my picture? It looks horrible. But I use this as an example. And I don't know, I said a 9 for sure. A lot of the clubs around here, they score from 0 to 9. I don't know how your club does it. But you usually put your best image in. When you put that image in, you're going to usually think that image is going to get the highest score, right? You think it's the best image you could have. And then somebody else looks at it and suddenly they're not being so nice to you. Okay. Sometimes that could be a little bit hurtful. So let's start at the beginning. We're going to go quickly over some equipment and some other basic things, and we're really going to get into the nitty-gritty about judging. So before I go any further, does anybody have any questions or thoughts you want to bring up? Is there anything in the, let me just see. Okay, I just want to make sure there were no questions in the chat. So overall, overview. We're going to talk about the equipment. We're going to talk about this light. Photography is about light, and you want a wow picture, shoot it in the right light. We're going to talk specifically and more specifically later about what the judge is looking for, talk a little bit about post-processing, and a little bit about final preparations. You know, I always love this saying. I'm sure you've all heard it before. The better camera doesn't make you a better photographer unless you really know how to use that camera. A lot of times, the better camera makes the person a worse photographer because there's so many bells and whistles and so many more things for them to learn. I've seen so many people come take great pictures with their iPhone. All of a sudden, they get a a DSLR or mirrorless, and suddenly they can't take pictures anymore. I was on a workshop one time, and the guy says, "So can everybody tell me why you're here?" And the one lady said, "I just want to take pictures as good as with my camera as good as my iPhone takes." And you kind of laugh at that. You know, it was a real thing. All right. So obviously, again, very basic. Your camera, you know, you're competing in these competitions that have a lot of different categories and things. You want to think about multiple focal ranges. You know, even though I think we're getting away from tripods with these super high ISOs that we could use, we're still in that thing where you put that camera on a steady tripod, you're able to do a lot more with it. It's really important that you learn advanced processing. You know, Photoshop and Lightroom, you know, those are the gold standards, and you know, you pretty much have to use one of those programs. Listen, there's lots of other ones. There's On1, and there's a whole bunch of others you could use, but whatever you're using, you need something to process those pictures. Okay. Finally, I want to say, get knowledge of, get your camera off auto mode, get your camera off program mode, start using manual, AV mode, TV mode, whatever. Just don't use automatic settings anymore. So your camera had the ability to change shooting modes. You always want to shoot in RAW. Again, if there's anybody new in your club, if you have a question about RAW versus a JPEG, I could answer that for you. Please just put it in the chat, or when we stop, just ask me. You should be shooting in RAW. And very simply, RAW is just data collection, and that RAW file, the picture that the camera takes and collects all this data, is just a bunch, it's just a bunch of data that eventually gets processed into a picture file. You want the ability to change the lens. You really want to know how to use your camera, and, you know, either read the manual or watch videos on your camera. So many people, and what they don't know how to use their camera, and they you know, while they're trying to figure stuff out, the action is happening, and they just miss the great picture. So again, you know, want to use one of the creative modes or manual mode. The preference is yours. A lot of people like AV mode. That's fine. Some things you might want to shoot in TV mode. Personally, I use manual mode 100% of the time. I think it's the easiest to use, and we could talk a little bit about that, but I can't imagine not shooting in manual. Those other things just confuse the heck out of me. This is a picture from Hoboken, New Jersey of you know, obviously the full moon over the Empire State Building, with the Lackawanna. Sorry, some of the bottom of this picture looks like it got cut off. the Lackawanna train station tower, and um, I forget the name of the other building, but another pretty popular one, Vanderbilt, that is. You can't shoot a picture like this in automatic mode. It's just not going to happen. Your exposure will not be right because your buildings are going to be too dark. Your moon's going to be too bright. You got to shoot these things in manual mode. That's how you get the exposure right across the frame. Again, shoot in RAW. If you're not comfortable shooting in RAW, start by shooting in RAW and a large JPEG, and then go from there processing your RAW files. When you're in camera club competitions, because we have so many competitions, so many different competitions, having a variety of lens helps. This picture is sort of a joke. I was asked by one of my friends to help him. He was a Sigma Pro, and we had to do what was called a lens challenge. And we had to shoot. The lens that's in my hand is the $12,000 Canon 2-400 with the built-in 1.4 converter. The lens on my left side there is the Sigma Contemporary, which is about $1,000 lens, and the one on my right there is the Sigma Sport, which is about a $2,000 lens. So what we were asked to do was go out and shoot birds and then look at the pictures and see if we could tell which pictures were taken with what lens. Guess what? You couldn't tell. Oh, I thought I put those pictures in here. I'm sorry. I thought I had those pictures in here. Whatever the case is, obviously the $12,000 lens was the best picture. Could you tell? Not really, but it captured it a lot quicker, and we had a lot of better action with that. Was it, $10,000-$11,000 more worth it? I don't think so. The other lenses were perfectly fine. All right, so talk about lenses. You're not always going to get, your iPhone can't take a picture like this. This was taken with a 600 millimeter with a 1.4 converter at a shutter speed of 1/3200th of a second. This was taken with a Canon 14 millimeter lens. Maybe you could get something like this with your iPhone nowadays. A little hard to get the light, longer exposure, 1/5 of a second. I don't know about taking this with your iPhone. This was taken with a Canon 180 millimeter lens. This is a cicada killer that caught himself a cicada. And this was taken with the Canon 24-105 using twin light flashes to throw light into the center of that flower. Okay. Again, very different lenses, very different styles of shooting, very different stuff going on here. Okay. And when you're in a camera club, you want to start practicing with this stuff because you want to really start working all these different styles of photography because that's how your photography is going to grow. All right. Stop there for a second. Any questions? Is the speed okay? I feel like I'm talking fast. Talk slower as we get into this other stuff.
We talk slow, but we listen fast.
Okay. Just tell me to slow down. It's okay.
No, you're great. You're fine.
Okay. So some of the things that judges look at, and we'll talk about other things later. Sharpness is key. If that picture is not in focus, the judges isn't even going to look any further. I still have noise in here. We have programs that really eliminate noise now. We have cameras that, very little noise, so it's not as big of a deal as it used to be, but sharpness is critical. Judges look at the backgrounds and the edges, and I'll show you some example. Judges look to see if the exposure is correct. A perfect pyramid histogram does not mean it's a perfect exposure. It depends what you're taking a picture of as to what that histogram should look like. Learn how to use that histogram. Learn what it means. Because then when you get back into post-processing and you look at that picture, your exposure will be perfect. Okay? Rules of competition, yes and no. We'll talk about that. When I judge, people come up and they say, do you know how hard that picture was to capture? Judges don't always look at difficulty at capture. That's a personal thing. It might mean something to me if I personally know how hard that capture was, if I've tried it and it's hard to do that. But don't count on that giving you extra points in a camera club competition. Um, just recently, a few months ago, there was a picture, a guy had a picture, it was a Zoom thing. A guy had a picture of a wood duck, and the wood duck was taking off away from the camera, made a big splash. The splash was overexposed, and the wood duck's head was so underexposed it was almost black. You couldn't see the beautiful colors in the thing. So the next morning I get an email from this guy, and he says, so this was where they scored, they score like 3 to 9. 9's the highest, 3's the lowest. I gave it like a 5. And the guy sends me a nasty gram email. He says, I think you need to look at this picture again. There's no chance that that was a 5. Do you know how hard that is to capture? And all I did, and I don't usually respond to those things, all I did was, yes, I know how hard it is to capture. And I put a link on my website to a wood duck taken off in the right direction, that was exposed properly, and everything was proper. I said, yes, I do know it, and this is what you should strive to do. But a lot of people, they get mad. They're like, you know how hard that was? Judges don't really take that into account unless they really have done that exact same thing. Judges look at subject matter. If you have assigned topics, does the subject matter, does it match the topic? Judges also look at post-processing errors. And again, I don't know about your club, but a lot of clubs will have a beginners group, a middle group, and then an advanced group. I see the most post-processing errors in that middle group. That's when people are starting to really learn how to use post-processing, and they tend to push things a little bit too far. Pay attention to that. So let's talk about sharpness of your picture. Sharpness isn't just your picture needs to be in focus. That's point of it. The focus point has to be in the right spot. But you also need the correct f-stop, so you have the correct depth of field. You also need the right shutter speed. And you also need an ISO that's not bringing in too much noise into the picture. The ISO these days doesn't matter as much. If your exposure is correct, your ISO is good. I want to remind you of something. If you underexpose pictures and you bring them into Lightroom and push that light slider, exposure slider to the right, you are going to introduce more noise than if you cranked up the ISO in your camera and got the exposure right in camera. Okay? So pay attention to that, because too much noise is going to make your picture look soft. And finally, good technique, using lenses and cameras with image stabilizers and using a tripod to get that camera steady when you take it. I took this picture one time. I looked in the back of my camera. I'm like, oh my God, that's a killer picture. That's an image of the year. And then all of a sudden I looked at it on my computer. And those of you, probably everybody could tell, the picture's out of focus. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it's a great capture and every wing position is good, head position is good. He's got something in his mouth. The picture's not in focus. Whatever the lowest score is, that's what this picture deserves. It's no good. It's a delete. A more common bird in nice light, in a nice position, that's tack sharp, is going to get a better score. Right? So this gull just sitting on the surf there, it's going to get a better score than this. This was a much harder picture to get, but I didn't get the picture because it's not in focus. So I didn't get the picture. This picture I got. Right? And everything looks good there. Background's clean, bird sharp. There's a little bit of dynamic because his foot is raised up a little bit. Why did I put this picture in there? Certain times you have to play with your focus a little bit. Females, usually a little softer focus on the face. But what you want sharp is the eyes. Okay? Guys, you might want to use a little more depth of field to get more of the whole face in focus. Right? So I made sure here those eyes were tack sharp. You have to consider depth of field. This is an oyster catcher banking. It's a long wingspan, and I got pretty close to this guy. Got to make sure that the wingspan is sharp from end to end. So sturdy tripod. If you don't have one or you have a cheaper one, think again. As you advance in photography, you're going to probably want to get a better tripod. All the tripods seem sturdy when you look at them on Amazon or B&H Photo, or you go to the camera store and the tripod looks sturdy. You never know where your camera is going to end up. This is Jim Shadle in Venice Bay in Florida. Who thought we would go out on his boat, go off the side of the boat, and walk through Venice Bay to shoot spoonbills? But that's what we did. And, that tripod has to hold steady in the bay like this. And the cheap tripod, it's not going to happen. I'm not saying you're all going to do this, but you just never know where you're going to end up. I never thought I'd be ending up taking pictures at this place. Tripod also allows you for longer exposure. This is Glacier National Park. Putting your camera on the tripod allows you for a really long exposure. Sometimes you want to freeze motion, sometimes you want to create motion. When you use a long shutter speed, you can create motion. This was just a cloudy, overcast evening, and nothing better to do than to create a long exposure. Now let's talk about your backgrounds and edges. Keep your backgrounds clean and check your edges either while you're post-processing or better yet when you're in the camera. I'm a big believer if you get that picture out of the camera perfectly, the processing becomes easier, and the processing that you do is going to make a really good picture, a really great picture. If you're depending on bringing your bad pictures into Lightroom and start playing with sliders to make it good, you're probably not going to make it too much of a better picture because you're just messing around too much. Some mandarin duck. I don't only have bird pictures. I take pictures of everything. That's why I gave you the and actually let me comment about this. Bird pictures always do good in competitions. That's one of the things I figured out early. I'm like, I better learn bird photography because those are the pictures that win competitions. Right or wrong, it's pretty common for that to happen. This is a mandarin duck that was in Central Park in New York, and we went there one morning, and this old guy came back. He had a bucket, he had feed in it, and he kept throwing it, and the mandarin duck kept flying toward us. And I'm like, oh boy, here he comes again, and I nailed this picture. This picture won a crap load of competitions. But what I want you to notice is look at the background. The background is just, this was using a 600 millimeter lens with a 1.4 converter, and then another 6 inches this bird would have flown, it would have been in too close of range. Like he was right there, which is why that background just completely blurred itself out. Here's one where I didn't have to play any games. Just the lotus inside this flower. Just, I don't remember what lens I used, but, zoomed in there, used the flower as the background. Nice, clean background, nothing distracting, whole picture sharp. That's all you need. Now, I'm going to use these pictures of sunflowers as an example. So I said before, what you should do is you should go around the edges of your picture. So if I'm going to shoot this picture, I'm going to look around my edges. Now, there's a couple things that are bothering me about this picture. Number one, if you look at the bottom of the picture, all the way at the bottom, why is that leaf intersecting with the edge of the picture? That's really distracting to me. That shouldn't be there. And listen, I don't care if you hang it on your wall and it looks nice, that's fine. But for a competition, the judges can say, why is that thing crossing the edge of the picture? The other thing, if you go up and around, the background is really bright. The main subject of your picture 95% of the time should be the sharpest and brightest part of the image, because your eyes go to the sharpest and or brightest part of the image. If things are brighter in the background, your eye is going to tend to drift. This just happened to me. When I flipped onto this picture, the first thing I looked at was the top left corner. And then all of a sudden I went to the top right corner, because those things are brighter than the subject. Then finally I went to the subject. They're distracting. Okay. Now, a couple of things. So I shot this picture and I'm looking and I'm like, yeah, I could do better than that. And there was 10 trillion sunflowers around. So I went to the next one. Look at this one. Ooh, sorry for the white. I'm not sure why the background there is white, but sorry about that. But try to ignore that. Notice the bright, how annoying it is. But look at the background in this one. Background is clean, nothing intersecting any of the edges. All I look at is the flower, as opposed to this one. Listen, this would be a great picture if that background, all you have to do is darken the background. Just use some burning techniques just to burn the background down so it's darker. And then maybe crop it a little bit, a little bit higher so that cross thing isn't in there. Boy, this is a really old picture, but I like to use this as a really good example. So balloon festival, saw all these balloons. There was a couple other balloons to the left side of the frame, and one of them, the balloon completely intersected the frame. Okay, so all I did was just cropped it a little bit tighter, like, to get that out, so everything's in the frame. Here's an interesting thing. I kind of like the way this balloon in the foreground, the visually heavy blue one. I kind of like the way that is in the picture, but I put this in a competition many years ago, and the judge said, nice picture, I like it, except this red thing in the top right corner is really distracting. It keeps pulling my eye up there. Okay, so when you go around and you look at your picture before you put it in a competition, go around the edges. Is there anything distracting? I could have cropped that off. I could have cloned that out. That's so easy to get rid of that. Okay, but it's little things like that that are going to make the difference between a really good score and a little bit of a lower score. This still got a pretty good score. He just didn't like that red thing. And kind of now that he mentioned it, every time I look at it, it annoys the crap out of me. Okay. Any questions so far about the background and edges and things like that and sharpness? You're
You
all
mentioned
good?
the correct focus point. You mean like
Yes.
the eye of a bird, or
Yes.
where in the composition is the most focused? Or could you just
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it depends what you're shooting. So like if you have an animal or a bird or a person, you want that focus point that you have on the camera, you want that to go right to the eye. Okay, that's why these new cameras have, it goes right to the eye. Now, if you're taking a picture of a landscape, it gets a little more complicated. A general rule of thumb is, a wider angle lens will get more depth of field. A longer lens gets less depth of field. Like if you use a 600 millimeter lens with a 1.4 converter, at 10 feet, you have about 1 inch depth of field. You have about 1 inch that's going to be in focus. So you have to really think about your settings. But if you're going to take a landscape, what you want to think about is what's called the hyperfocal distance. And their hyperfocal distance, an easy cheat around this for a landscape, if you're using anything wider than a 24 millimeter lens, even probably up to 30, if you focus about a third of the way into the image, right, and use like an f11 or f16 or f22, you're pretty much your depth of field, the whole thing is going to be in focus. But you have to make sure that your picture is in focus. And what happens is a lot of people use that automatic focus point where the camera just picks it for you. I'm not talking about the eye control where it finds the eye. I'm talking about where you just point it and it finds the most contrast. And a lot of people say, well, my pictures are out of focus. That's the first thing you want to turn off. You want to select where that focus point is, whether it's a third of the way in or on the animal's eye, wherever it is. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Now let's talk about exposure. It's about the light. Learn about exposure, learn about the histogram, learn what that histogram means. Be very careful of the whites in your picture. Shadows you might be able to bring back. Whites, once they're blown out, once they're overexposed, you will never get them back. We talk about shooting to the right, exposing to the right. The point is not to blow out. If you look at your histogram, it shouldn't be beyond, it shouldn't be pinned up to the right wall. Your eyes have a much bigger dynamic range than even the best of the best sensors. You know, I'm a Canon user, but these Sony and these Nikon sensors are just ridiculous in their dynamic range. Even the new Canon ones are really good. They still don't do what the eye does. And there's certain scenes that can handle all the dynamic range. Therefore, you have to bracket your pictures. You have to take multiple exposures and blend them together in post-processing so that everything is going to be exposed right. Classic example is like a waterfall with a bright sky. The sky is one exposure, the waterfall is another exposure, and the rocks within the waterfall are another exposure. And it's very hard to get those rocks and the bright sky at the right exposure, and then also get your water at the right speed that you want it. So that's when you have to look at bracketing. And that's where the high dynamic range imaging comes in. And again, be a little more careful about underexposing, because the second you underexpose and have to bring stuff back in Lightroom, you're going to introduce noise. You're going to introduce more noise that way than if you shot it at a higher ISO, especially if you're using a camera that was made in the last 3 years. Good light always gets better scores. This is Capitol Reef National Park. I mean, that light is just absolutely off the wall, right? Good light, better scores, because people look at it, it's like, whoa, that is really cool light. This is in the Adirondacks in New York, and so let me see here. Yeah. So we used to have a vacation house there, so I spent a lot of time shooting up there. So this is night one. I went there. This is I think it's called Franklin Lakes. I went and shot this. It was okay. Went back the next night, basically the same place. It was a little better. Then I went back the next night. Same place. Which picture's better? I mean, the one with the great light is going to be the better picture. It's going to get the better score in a competition because the light is really good. Badlands National Park in South Dakota. You know, early morning light as the sun starts to come up. The light, the light, the light. That's what it's all about. So you want to get that exposure correct. This is Iceland. You know, we were in Iceland in June when you had, 4 hours of darkness. We stayed at this place for, I kid you not, for 18 hours. We watched sunrise, sunset, we watched dawn, dusk, within 4 hours that happened. Just shot a lot of different exposures, a lot of different shutter speeds. How do you want that water? Do you like it frozen? Some people like it frozen. Some people like it a little milky. Taking multiple exposures, but still getting the exposure correct. Understand the exposure triangle. I'm not going to go over this in detail, but I want you to look at something. I want you to look at the bottom there where it says ISO is 100, shutter speed is 1/125th of a second, and the f-stop is f16. Look at the one next to it, ISO 400, shutter speed 1/250, f-stop is f8. If you don't fully understand what I'm going to say, you need to go start looking at this exposure triangle. That is the same exact exposure. Those two exposures are the same exact exposure. Okay? You need to understand exposure that way. They're both the same, they're just different settings. There's only one right exposure for your picture. But that doesn't mean that, I'm just looking at some names here. Julie might like a longer exposure. Joe might like a shorter exposure. Nancy might like a middle exposure, right? But the exposure is the same. The setting is the exposure is the same. The settings are different based on what you want out of the picture. Again, if you don't understand what I'm telling you there, that those are two exact same exposures, you need to go study that exposure triangle and get it in your head. So when you're taking the picture, I don't have to think all these different things. Oh, I'm increasing I'm changing the f-stop, so I have to change the shutter speed. Then I have to change the ISO. It should just happen automatically, because then you could think about composition. You could think about the artistic side of photography, because this stuff should just come automatic. And again, I kid you not, it's just automatic for me. If I change the f-stop, if I change the shutter speed, it just happens automatically. I just move my fingers and it happens. I don't have to think about it. I think about what I'm looking at. Again, histogram, I mentioned it a little before. And I actually said before what I would have said now. You know, the top one says normal exposed. Again, that's not necessarily a normal exposure. If you have a little, a little tiny black bird and the rest of the scene is bright, your histogram isn't going to look like this. It's going to look more like the one on the bottom, but that might be the correct exposure. What you want to make sure is that the middle one and the bottom one, you don't have a bunch of pixels pushed up against the wall like this first one. Okay. I think we can even stop talking about HDR, or don't really do HDR. If anything, I'll do image blending. But these new sensors are just so fantastic. You could get a lot of stuff within the realm of your sensor. I always love to bring this picture up. This is, God bless my dog Augie. But this was from probably around 2010. Augie didn't like going in the water. And so I was out shooting sunrise in the morning, and the camera and stuff was in the back seat of the car. And all of a sudden, Augie decides after a year or two of not going in the water, he would go in the water. So I grabbed my camera from the back of my car, started taking pictures of him. When I went home, Augie was just completely blown out. I wasn't even paying attention. And this is like 2010, maybe 2012. But even with the technology back then, and it's so much better now, I was able to recover all the highlights, most of the highlights. If you look in his hair, there's still some blown out stuff. But if you looked at that screen after I took the picture, and I didn't look at it until I got home, it was just flashing. It was just blinkies because it was so bright. You couldn't even see anything on him, right? So these sensors are amazing, but you still want to get that exposure right, because there's going to be a lot more you can do with it. Know what you're shooting. Shooting a black bear, I got to watch that left side of the histogram. I don't want that to be underexposed, because you're going to lose all the fine detail in the bear's feathers or hair. Okay. Another stop there. Any questions, comments, thoughts? You guys are okay? I'll look in the you guys are all good? You're not sleeping, right?
No, you're doing a great job at explaining. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. So let's talk about a little bit about rules of composition. People tell you, well, people go back and forth. Rules of composition are really important. Some people say, well, ignore the rules. Count Basie says, the jazz conductor, he says, master your instrument so you know how to ignore the rules. And I love that. you need to know what the rules are before you can start ignoring them. Again, I see people that are newer in the clubs and say, well, somebody told me not the rule of thirds doesn't matter. It does matter initially. And the rule of thirds isn't something somebody made up. The rule of thirds is by looking at fine art and finding these rules. What's the common denominators of these things that seem to be really fine art? Okay, that's where a lot of these rules come from. It's not just that somebody made them up. Now, I certainly don't always follow the rule of thirds, but if I'm having a trouble with a composition, then I'm going to go to the rule of thirds and say, okay, I'm going to start using these rule of thirds. I'm going to put everything in the right spot. Okay, and then the picture tends to come together. Leading lines, what I said before, eyes go to the bright areas, eye goes to the sharp areas. If there's writing in there, don't cut it off. I'll show you examples of all this. I said it before, I'll say it again, difficulty of capture. And then sometimes the subject steals the show. Sometimes you could get away with that. So here's an example of rule of thirds. Okay, there's actually an example of a couple things in here. The brightest part of the image, which is the sun, is in that third position. There's a leading line. The light is a leading line that brings you up to the sun. Okay. If you notice, there's a little lifeguard stand to the right there, but it was darkened because if that was too bright, your eye is going to stop. And the picture's not going to have a natural flow. It's not going to have any rhythm to it. Leading lines, putting things in the third. Also, the horizon's in the third, essentially. The sun is in the third. All the important stuff's in the third. Everything else adds to that. Everything else brings your eye to that. And I'm not saying, this is really a competition image, but along with rule of third goes the idea of odd numbers, like having three things in the image. Okay, so this one kind of follows some of the rules of thirds. It has three things in it. The three things are the lighthouse, the house, and the little anchor in the front. Now, here's what happens. If there's only two things in the image, your eye tends to bounce back and forth between the two things. Okay, if you add a third thing, an anchor, and this really has an anchor, right? What it does is it has you step back and kind of look at the whole picture. Okay, so you want odd numbers of things, not even numbers of things. All right, there are some exceptions, which I'll talk about, but that rule of three that brings everything together so that you look at the whole picture. And if you're not looking at the whole picture, if you were to take this anchor, if you were to cut this anchor out of the picture, there's two things. What do you want me to look at, the house or the lighthouse? Because my eye's going back and forth between them. No, put the anchor in there, then I could step back and look at the whole scene. Okay. Rule of third also goes for the eyes, right? So like the eyes, whether it's a person or an animal, should be in that top third. Okay, or not the eyes, really, it's just really the head should be in the top third of the picture. Okay. Again, this is just the model. Eyes are in the top third of the picture. This is Cathedral Valley in Escalante National Monument in Utah. And I guess, sorry, I don't know. I'm not sure what the third is in there. I think the third is where the shoreline is there, right? That's in the third of the picture. I have this picture where sometimes with these reflections, half and half works. And I have this picture with a reflection. The one 50-50 didn't work. As soon as I moved it up to this third, I'm like, that's the better picture. Oh, so wait, hold on. Maybe. Yeah, actually, yeah. So now let's talk about leading lines. So, and actually this picture is more leading lines. So I apologize for that. Usually I have these labeled. I'm not sure. I think I changed the program not too long ago. So the leading line here is the shoreline, right? So the shoreline on the left is kind of a leading line. It brings you into the center of the picture, brings you up through the canyon and out through that through that hole that sort of looks like a heart up to the sky. Okay. And I tried this picture half and half. It just didn't work. When I did it like this, put it in a third, use that shoreline as the leading line, I think that the picture turned out perfect. Here's another one with the leading line. This is Death Valley National Park. We're lucky enough to have just about a full moon there. Right at the right time of the day. Found this area of hardened sand, used it as a leading line to bring us right up to the moon. Okay, and also again, the horizon line there is up in the third. You want your pictures to be a little bit dynamic. And I have to just go back for this because for some reason, I apologize. Some of these slides are messed up. So you want your pictures to be a little bit dynamic, right? This picture here is very static of this flower, right? The flower is straight up. It's in the middle. It could be better. And the way you could make this flower better is by tilting your camera, okay? Tilting it so that it's coming in at an angle. This is a lot more dynamic than this picture here, right? So your eyes go to the sharpest or brightest part of the picture. A couple things about this picture. If I was really to put this picture in a competition, I think the foreground and the background are too bright. I would darken them a little bit. Notice the depth of field here. Notice her left eye is tack sharp. And look how fast the focus falls off. Her right eye is starting to lose focus. What you want to do is make sure that both those eyes are in focus. Use the right depth of field for that. So if I was to put this picture in a competition, I'm probably going to crop off a little bit on the left side. I'm going to darken the background, and I'm going to find an exposure where both her eyes are sharp. Unless there was some reason, I just want you to look at the first eye, or at the left eye. If there's writing in the picture, don't cut it off. Look at the picture of the upper left. What happens to that picture? And I don't even know. This is just like a snapshot with my cell phone I took, for example. But what do you focus on? You focus on, what are those words? Floats, goats, ease, lattes, sickle, right? You start focusing on that and you forget about the picture. And again, in a competition, when the judge has 5 seconds to look at these things, he's not even going to go any further. It's going to stop right there. Right? Look at the picture on the bottom. Coca-Cola. If I cut that Coca-Cola, you'd probably be thinking, oh, it's Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola. But you never even look at the rest of the picture. So this has to do with difficulty of capture. This is, I don't know, it's some air show. Usually I go to the New York Air Show and a couple other ones. And catching these planes, these Blue Angels crossing, is very hard. And they'll only do it a couple times if you've ever been to air shows. So it takes a little bit of skill. Now, I've seen it where the planes overlapped each other, okay? Meaning, the wing on the one is covering the wing on the other. Or I've seen it where they're almost there, but you got the two rear ends almost together. And people put it in competition, and they'll come up to you after and say, do you know how hard that is to capture? I do. But if you keep practicing, you're going to get a picture like this where they're not intersecting and they're right on top of each other. I have better ones than this. I have ones where they're actually upside down and they're crossing and their tops are going. I should put those pictures in there. Sometimes the subject steals the show. There used to be, for years, we used to go up to the New England Camera Club Council. They had a conference every year, which was a huge, really good thing at Amherst, UMass Amherst. And one of the things they did was they had models hanging around. So the models would hang around, and you could photograph them, and it was a lot of fun. So, this young lady, she's gorgeous. When you look at this picture, you just, this is one where the subject steals the show. Now, I put this picture in there on purpose because this was really just a pre-capture. I was just kind of shooting to get my exposure. But, when you look at it, it's like, whoa, but look at things in this picture. Look at her hand position. Look at her hair flying away. She didn't even really comb her hair at this point yet. Look at her bottom hand. Look at the other hand. She's got her hair in her fingers. Okay? You might get away with a picture like this because the subject is stealing the show. But if a judge is really good, they're going to stop and look and say, whoa, there's so many errors. Why don't you pose your model properly? Things like that. Okay. So be aware of things like that. Don't just think, oh, you got a beautiful kid or you got a beautiful scene, so it's going to get a great score. Because the better judge is not going to give you a better score. They're going to start looking. All right. I got really lucky. This young lady became a professional model. And I got really lucky because one of my pictures of her was on her cover page for like 2 or 3 years. So I got really lucky with taking pictures of this young lady. All right. Questions? We're good? Okay. So other common issues, and we're going to talk about each one of these. 59th Street. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is the Manhattan and Brooklyn Bridge. Full moon, which I like using the program Planet. There's also photo pills or photographer's ephemeris you could use to predict things like this, where they're going to happen and where you should be. I like Planet Pro. It's like Plan IT Pro because you could virtually set things up. So this was pretty much the picture that came out of the camera. But there's a problem with this picture. It's got a major yellow color cast to it. Look around. Look for white things that are properly exposed, like the moon. Okay? Or look at other things. Now, if you really look into the buildings, there's a little carousel under the bridge there. Those things are really bright. They look white, but that's because the exposure really isn't correct on them. They're blown out. Here's the way the picture should look at. Like, there's the color cast. That's the way the picture should look like. A lot of people in those middle groups, they learn that saturation slider, like, oh, that looks really good. Okay, but this is the reality of it, not that. If a subject is moving, whether it's a car, a person running, a bird, there should be more room in front of the subject than behind it. It's this feeling of rhythm in your picture where the bird needs someplace to fly. If I cropped it right in front of this bird's head, when you look at the picture, you're going to get an illusion that this bird is going to either fly out of the picture or run into the edge of the picture. So always put more room in front of something that's moving. Person running, a car moving, a train moving, a bird moving. Put more room in front. So it gives you that feeling of rhythm. It makes the picture more natural to look at. Here's an example of oversaturation. I know it's oversaturated globally. I mean, it's pretty obvious that it is. But, if you look in the window there, those windows are red. So either the building's on fire or somebody pushed their yellows too much, right? Then there's this one where saturation was completely almost taken out of it. Whoa. So I don't know about your screen, but this picture does not look right on my screen. That picture looks worse. I guess this was that's what it was. So oversaturated, normal exposure, that's the way it should look. And here's one where somebody tried to add saturation later. You don't have red, sand's not usually red like that, right? Maybe in Hawaii you got pink sand, but this wasn't Hawaii. That's just all areas that are out of the gamut of the color range. Look at horizons. If you look at like your friends who go on vacation somewhere and they take these beautiful sunsets, right? Because they're sitting at the restaurant and it happens to be sunset, so they take out their cell phone and take the picture. They're not photographers. the horizons are crooked, almost always, right? You want to make sure that horizon is straight. A judge is going to say, oh, it looks like all the water is going to fall out of the picture, right? Camera club or photographers get that horizon straight, okay? So that's simple. If you didn't do it in camera, it takes half a second in post-processing to straighten that. So now it depends on how your images are projected in competition. I'm not exactly familiar with your competitions, but I want you to think about how is that picture being presented? How is that judge looking at the picture? If you hung your picture in an art gallery, you'd have a nice frame, a nice mat, everything would be the right color, the lighting would be nice, everything else. When you're putting it into a competition, have an idea. Is the judge looking at it digitally? Is the judge looking at it on a big screen in front of everybody? Are you sending the judge the pictures so they can look at it at home? Because that presentation is important. So this was a shoot that I did a couple of years ago of this young lady. She wanted these high contrast black and white pictures. And I just love the results of the pictures that came out here. But look at this picture. You just kind of see some light in all of this black because the presentation isn't good. If I know I'm going to show this picture on a black screen, what I want to do is I want to put a stroke line around it. A stroke line is a white, or it could be any color. It should be white, thin line that defines where your picture is. Because if you have all these dark spots and it's looking on a screen that's dark, I'm not going to know where's the picture start, where's the screen end. So the presentation is critical. In this case, just putting a white stroke line defines where the picture is. And it brings out the subject. Background. This isn't my picture. It's a picture I pulled off of Facebook or something. You know, certain birds, certain animals, their body habitus, their body structure is similar to the environment that it's in. That protects it. Okay? But pay attention to the background. In this picture, that background is so distracting. There's so much going on there. It's so bright. You know, you're lucky you even see the heron in there. Okay? You do, and people might argue, well, it's in its natural environment, but that's not the only natural environment for herons. You know, this isn't a heron, it's a reddish egret, but same kind of bird. But look at the background. Just getting at a little bit of an angle so that the water is the background. The water's clean. The bird is sharp. There's nothing competing. It's all about the bird. In this one, it's not all about the bird. Again, my eye goes to the right side of this picture where it's really bright. I want that picture in a competition. I want it to go right to the subject and not look at anything else. I could care less about anything else in this picture. If I'm going to look, it's going to be after I look at the subject. And those 5 to 10 seconds the judge has to look at the picture, this is what you want him to see, not this. So I talked before about the rule of threes and odd numbers. Well, you can't always have odd numbers. For example, these bear cubs playing with each other. It's 2, right? And that breaks the rule of 3. But when you have, this is Lake Clark in Alaska, when you have 2 subjects, a couple things have to be happening. They should be interacting with each other, as these bear cubs are doing, as this couple is doing, interacting with each other. I don't care that there's 2 subjects here, because the interaction is they're looking at each other. It's making one picture. These bear cubs playing, it's making one picture. If they don't interact with each other, they should be interacting with you, the camera, right, as they are in this picture. The other option is they should be all looking at something in common in the picture, right? So here's a picture of 2 subjects. but they're both looking out the window. They're both looking at the same thing. I see pictures, especially people take pictures of their kids. Or I see people take pictures of like a family of animals. If everything's looking in a different direction, one kid's looking to the left, one kid's looking to the right, one kid's looking at you, that's not a good picture. Either have them looking at you, have them looking at each other, right? Or have them looking at something in common. And that common thing doesn't have to be in the picture. The last thing regarding this, and again, I greatly apologize. When you start getting, I don't know how much nature your club does, but when you start getting into these nature competitions, I'm in a club. I don't compete anymore. I haven't competed in a while, but when you have two, that's what this is about. When you have like two subjects like this, the picture that's going to do better is the picture where you could see eyes on both the subjects, right? So you could see the eye on the egret, you could see the eye on the fish. That's going to get you a better score. We joke around in our club, and our club has gotten so good. It's like, yeah, we also want to see the eye of the fly that's in the fish's mouth, because these pictures really get good. Okay. Again, natural stopping point there. Questions. Does anybody want to add anything? Does anybody want to add, give any anecdotal stories, or anybody want to complain about judges? You guys don't complain about judges down there, right?
Oh, no, never.
That's a loaded question.
We do have a lot of
On
nature
the
photographers,
on the picture of the model that you said stole the show,
Yes.
how would you have repositioned her hands?
I should have put the repositioned one. So first of all, we combed her hair so she didn't have as much flyaway hair. Secondly, so we could go back there. Isabella is her name.
She's very pretty.
She's beautiful, and you could probably win a competition because it would steal the show because the judge, the judge think. So this hand that's on the bottom, it's just kind of out there. I would either have put it over her arm or put it down flat on the ground, and this other picture I would put it up on her shoulder so that her fingers are showing. Right, that's what I would have done differently. And listen, if you can't fix these flyaway, if you can't get the flyaway hairs done right when you took the picture, especially in a case like this, because it wasn't a one-on-one situation, you could just fix all that in post-processing. Okay, so that's
okay.
what. And there's lots of videos out there on correct position, and those little things like putting that bottom hand on her other elbow or arm and putting that top hand on her shoulder and letting you see the long fingers, that would make this picture a lot better. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. So I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn here because I want to talk a little bit more about post-processing now. Again, are there any questions about taking the picture or anything like that at this point? Okay. So again, I don't know where everybody is in their photography careers here, but I say this in almost every one of my programs. Get some sort of a post-processing workflow. Get something that works for you and stick with it. Because believe me, you're taking pictures, and before you know it, you have hundreds of thousands of pictures, and you're like, where's that picture of the girl model in Amherst? What year was that? You want some sort of organized workflow and some sort of structure for how you get your pictures from your camera to wherever you're going to put them. So I'm going to just show you what my workflow is. Think about yours. Certainly welcome to steal mine if you don't have one. So what I do is I take my pictures from the card, right? I actually have one right here. Here's the card. I'm going to stick it in the card reader. And I'm going to download it somewhere. Now, what I do is I have 3 redundant places that I download the card to. One is what I call a working drive. So that's just a disk, like a 4 terabyte disk that I keep my pictures on. That, I'll go to, well, I'll use it if I'm going to process from them. The second place it goes to is I have a Synology in my house. I have a Synology RAID drive system that all the pictures get backed up to. And the third place is my website actually has an archive area that I could download all my files there. So I have my files in 3 separate places. And pretty much I do that before I do anything. Because if something happens, I don't want to lose all the pictures. I spend a fortune on going on some trip somewhere and then having your pictures be lost because of a corrupted card or corrupted drive or something like that. So there's always 3 copies of my pictures. I don't delete that card until I make sure that I have 3 copies. Okay. So I download them from the card. Again, backup drive, Synology drive, and then up to my website. So I automatically already have 3 things. Then what I do is I review them in Lightroom or Bridge. I delete any garbage. And then what I do for all the work. So let's just say I was recently in I go on a lot of trips. I was recently in, let's say, Escalante National Monument in Utah. So what I did when I came home, I had all the cards, I had all the pictures, and the first thing I did was I just took all of them, whether they were going to be deletes or not, and I just put a couple keywords in them, like Utah, Escalante, right? I just put those keywords in them. So that if ever I need to get them, I know that there's some keywords in them, even if I don't intend to keep some of them. I delete any of the garbage. I keep saying though, when you shooting like birds and stuff now, it's like, it used to be you take 1,000 pictures, 3 of them were good or 3 of them were sharp. Nowadays with these cameras, it's like, 997 of them are sharp and 3 of them are not sharp. And that has to do with the technology changing. But, delete the garbage. Do your processing in either Lightroom, Adobe Camera Raw, or whatever program you use. This is the way I do it. I do a lot more processing now. I no longer use Lightroom. And we can talk about that if anybody wants it. I mainly use Adobe Camera Raw and a little bit of Photoshop, but most of the processing is done in Adobe Camera Raw. And then what I do is I save them in a full size. You could either use a PSD document or you could use a TIFF document. And I save those pictures in a file somewhere with all the layers in it. Okay. And then when I decide I'm going to do something with that picture, then the final thing I do is I resize it and I sharpen it. So do you guys have a special size picture that you enter for competitions? Like the dimensions, like is it like 1200 by whatever?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
What is that?
Trying to think. I think the maximum size is like 3,000 something by, I don't know.
So yours are big. And are most of your pictures, are they shown on a slide projector or are they shown like, digitally?
Digitally.
They're also, okay.
Listen, our size is 3840
Okay.
by 21 something 60.
Okay. Right. So now if you take your picture out of the camera, if you have a newer camera, it's going to be like 7,000 or 8,000 pixels on the long side, right? So you got to shrink it. But what I do is once I process it, I leave it as a PSD file with everything on it. Now, if I decide I'm going to make it smaller because I'm going to put it in a competition, then I'll take it from that document and make it smaller. If I decide I'm going to print it to go on my wall, I'll take that full-size one and get that one printed. Okay. The last thing you should do with your picture is do sharpening. You shouldn't sharpen your picture until you got your final size. All right. Now, the AI sharpening programs are a lot better at sharpening the picture, and they don't always have to be at that final size, but no matter what, you're still better off waiting till the final size before you sharpen it. So when I have this full PSD or TIFF file, that's not sharpened. I don't sharpen it until I decide what I'm going to do with the picture. If I'm going to put it on my website, I sharpen it with one algorithm. If I'm going to put it in a competition, I sharpen it with another one. If I'm going to print it, I sharpen it with another one. Okay, because it will make the difference in how your picture looks. Okay, now you guys don't do Photo Contest Pro, but I do want to tell you, most of the clubs in the Northeast, not a lot of them in the Northeast, use Photo Contest Pro, which is a program. You don't use this, right? I jumped to conclusions.
Yeah, no,
Pardon me?
we don't.
Okay, and so this is a really good program that kind of organizes your pictures for competitions and stuff. But if you put it into Photo Contest Pro, and a lot of these programs that you use, it resizes the picture for you. So if you put a picture in that's too small, it'll upscale the picture, and all of a sudden your picture will be on the screen, and you'll be like, "What the heck happened to my picture?" So make sure you put it in the dimensions that your president just told you those pictures should be at. Don't make it smaller, don't make it bigger. Do the exact dimensions. Don't make some other program, stuff like Zoom will also do it. Don't make some other program resize your picture. You resize it. So again, get it to the right size, and you require JPEGs.
Yes.
Yeah, your pictures are JPEG. Convert it to JPEG. Typically, when you're doing stuff on Zoom and these other things, the RGB color space is the best color space to use. Okay, it's not 100%, and some people might know a little bit more about this and might argue with that. But typically, what most people tell me is that the RGB is the best color space for visual presentations. The other thing I want to tell you about is after you process your picture and you have it in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever, take a look again at the histogram. Now, your histogram goes from 0 to 255, okay? Things that are closer to that 255 are going to be bright. Things that are closer to the 0 are going to be darker. The guy who wrote a couple of these photo contest programs told me this. Take a look at your picture and try to squeeze those pixels so that you have nothing under 20 on the left side and nothing over 240 on the right side. Because as soon as that image projects, whether it's through Zoom or whether it's through a slide projector, it can change those things, and it could push 5 or 10 points on either side of the histogram. So you could put a perfectly exposed image in there, right? But the brights are maybe at 250. You put it through the projector, and all of a sudden it looks blown out. And you're looking at your picture, it's like, I know that picture wasn't blown out. Okay, I even had a calibrated monitor. It doesn't matter. Try to lower that histogram down, squeeze it in, less than 240 over 20. Okay, that will make a difference, especially if you're looking at your pictures and you look in the competition and you're like, wait, that picture wasn't that dark or that picture wasn't that bright. You really want to pay attention to this. So here's kind of what they did here. Look at the left side, look at the right side. Okay. Now, for the last part of this, we're almost done. And do you guys use categories? Do you have open end categories? How's that work?
We have color pictorial, we have nature, photojournalism, monochrome, and did I name them all?
That's it.
Yes, you
Yeah.
named them all.
Okay. So pay careful attention to what the assigned topics are. Okay. And a lot of clubs will have very specific assigned topics. So ask yourself the question, do I have to explain why this picture is in this category? So for these clubs that use different things, I like to call this picture a falcon who got ahead. And I apologize. This picture looks washed out to me. Trust me, this picture is not washed out. But whatever the case is, oh, that's why I have this picture in here. And again, let me just ask you the question because I never judged at your club. Do you title the pictures and do the judges look at the titles?
Yes.
We title our pictures, yes.
They're not supposed to look at them though.
Correct. So
But they do.
Correct or not, if your title has to explain the picture, there's something wrong with your picture. Okay? And I see people say, "Oh, a falcon on this is the title, a falcon on a stump with a head in its mouth." Okay? I don't need to tell you that because you could see it in the picture. If you have to explain that much in your picture, there's something missing in your picture. Don't depend on the judge to interpret what you wrote as the title for your picture. If the picture doesn't tell the story, your picture isn't strong enough. After you decided what pictures you're going to put in the thing, have people look at them or go back after a couple of days and look at them before you actually submit them and say, okay, does that picture tell the story? So here's a good picture that doesn't really tell the story. I like this picture. This picture's printed. It's in my house. Actually, it's not in my house anymore. I took it down, but it was in my house. This isn't a good picture for a competition. It's got a lot of feel to it. It's cool. I've showed it to some people who think it's the greatest picture in the world, and I've showed it to some people who say, like, why didn't you delete that picture? Okay? I personally like it. But I would never put something like this in a competition because what rules does it follow?
None.
Does it have any flow to it? Does my eye go anywhere? It doesn't. It doesn't follow any rules. It's very chaotic. There's a lot going on. If I was to hang this on the wall of my house and I could sit there and look at it for an hour, it might tell me a lot. But if I got to look at this for 5 to 10 seconds and make a judgment on it, I can't judge anything. It's like, where do you want me to look at? The fog, the trees, and why is it black and white? Why isn't it in color? Like all those things that we go in my mind, boom, it's going to get a bad score. Okay. So be aware of that. Look at your pictures and honestly ask yourself questions like that. Ask yourself, what's the storyline in the picture? And this is truth. I was presenting this program one time. So, people have said, oh, well, the color yellow, motion, city, street, blah, blah, blah. This is what one person said. Oh, I would name this modern computer bags. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, because this lady has a bag and this guy has a bag that potentially have computers in them. Okay, that's a very minor part of this image. I don't think I would name the picture or put a picture in a competition about computer bags like this. Right here, you're looking at perspective, maybe architecture, things like that. Here, looking at like a selective color. Here, looking at patterns, lines, things like that. Okay. That's that. Do we have a few more minutes? Do you want to talk a little bit about AI?
Sure.
Okay. I have a whole program on AI. And I love talking about AI, but I just want to tell you a couple things. What we do is photography. Be honest to the art of photography. Make your pictures from your camera. Process them all you want, but make them start in your camera. There's AI that can really help you, and there's AI that's going to make photography not photography. Okay? And know the difference. This picture by Tim Flack, it went into a National Geographic worldwide competition, and he did this on purpose to prove a point. The AI picture, the one on the left, won the entire competition. As soon as it won, he came out and said, I just want you to know that was completely computer generated. This animal does not exist. The one on the right is a real picture. The one on the left is completely AI generated. When they're side by side, you could kind of tell. But if they're not side by side, you can't tell. Okay? If you're going to use AI to generate your image, you are no longer doing photography. End of story. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. Just don't call it photography. Okay? But there's some great AI stuff. The eye control focus is AI. It's all machine learning. A lot of these programs that make your job easier, like Topaz AI and Gigapixel and these other programs, all you're doing is using it to do stuff to your picture that you would have done otherwise. It just makes it easier to do. Okay? There's all these generative programs. These are just an example of some of them. There's a lot more. These pictures generate the picture for you. It's not photography. Did I not? Damn. God, there's an important picture missing there. Here's some things I played around with. And I apologize the pictures aren't here. I don't know where they are. Hold on. I did some things where I said, these are the search terms I put in there, or the terms I put in there. Elk, mountain, stream, mountain, angry sky. And I got a beautiful picture of an elk with a big mountain and a stream and everything else like that. You could really be specific. Sunset sky on January 15, 2023 at Badlands National Park. It'll give you the picture and with the correct weather on that date. People are saying to be careful how you keyword your images nowadays because AI could steal them based on the keywords. They have things now that will block your keywords so AI can't steal stuff from you. Okay. Generative AI programs can also replace things, and I'm sure you've all played around with it if you use Photoshop. Add a snowy background, add a forest background, add a city background. I have a picture of a fox, and I apologize. It's usually in this program. So the fox was taken in a parking lot with a horrible background. I selected the fox, selected the background, and I said snowy scene. Fox standing in a river, fox on the snow, fox in a forest. And it put these backgrounds in perfect. And nobody will in a million years be able to tell that those things were AI generated. You have to know where do you draw the line? Somebody said to me, well, if the judge can't tell, who cares? Again, is it really that important for that 60-cent ribbon? That you're cheating yourself, you're cheating the art of photography. Okay? So really beware of what you're doing with the AI programs. Know where it can help you, know where it's crossing the line. And everybody's going to put that line in a different place. Think about where you are with that. Finally, the evening of the competition, if you have a sit-down evening, enjoy all the pictures that you see. Listen to what the judge says, okay? You're going to start hearing repeated things about your pictures and other people's pictures. It's valuable. It will help you, whether you agree with it or not, okay? Eventually, it'll help you. Maybe it'll, a lot of times you think about it a couple of days later, you're like, you know what? The judge was probably right. Score your own image. Here's the important thing. Develop your own pattern of critiquing. When you're sitting there and you're in one of these competitions, the judge is going through the pictures. Make your own critique. As soon as you see it, make your own critique. Okay? Because once you develop that pattern, when you're out there holding the camera and you're going to take that picture, that critique is going to go through your head. And you'll be like, okay, is the background clean? Everything's in focus. Boom, press the button. Okay? I always like this, allow a 24-hour statute of limitations and move on. Again, I've seen people hold grudges. I've seen sometimes it gets really ugly. My good friend Ben, God bless him, he lived to 87 and was taking pictures at 86 out on the beach. He would call me or I would call him the day after a competition. We'd say how bad the judge was, and that was it. It ended there. That was it. And then after competitions, go back later and review your images. If you're not happy with it, I always tell the story. I had this picture that I thought was really, really good. And I put it in the competition. Again, scores from 3 to 9. Put it in the competition, judge gives it a 5. I'm like, this judge doesn't know what they're talking about. I said, I'm going to put it back in another competition. Put it back in another competition. It gets a 6. I'm like, that's 2 judges that don't know what they're talking about. Put it in the third competition. It gets another 6. I'm like, you know what? I'm the one who doesn't know what I'm talking about. That 3 people gave that a bad score. There's something wrong with that picture, right? So, be honest with yourself in those things. Listen, sometimes judges make mistakes. I judge a lot. I've been judging for a lot of years, and I judge a ton. I just told somebody I had 11 requests to judge this past weekend, like for next year. I had 11 emails with requests to judge. I also run the New Jersey Federation of Camera Clubs, what we call a judge training program. We don't really train judges, but we just take qualified people and we sit in a room and we have people sit in the chair and actually critique images. And then we kind of help guide them into, how they're going to judge and whether or not they really do want to judge. Remember that different competitions, there's different requirements. If I'm judging PSA, that's very different than judging, like a local camera club. Or I got asked to judge believe it or not, it's not a camera club. It's a club that meets about fungus. like for cooking fungus and all this other stuff, like, mushrooms and things like that. So they asked me, can you judge our competition? We have a photo competition every year. I can't expect those pictures to be like the same as, an advanced camera club pictures, right? So the judge has to adjust themselves differently. Sometimes judges aren't very good at that. And sometimes you're just going to get a bad judge, and that's just the way it is. But realize, all you're asking from the judge, all you are asking from them is, I want your opinion of my picture. And if I give you an opinion of your picture, you don't have to like it. You don't have to not like it. That's just my opinion. There's no right or wrong. There's no absolute scores. It's art. Okay. But work on the technical stuff and get that technical stuff down. And I promise you, as your photography improves, as your technical ability improves, suddenly you're going to see that your pictures have taken the next step, in your photography world. This is that initial picture with the corn stalks cloned out of it. Looks a lot better this way.
Much better.
Okay. So, questions, comments, thoughts. Let me find this thing. Stop sharing. There we go. I apologize that some of my slides are missing. I'm not exactly sure what happened. I'm just reading some of these comments. The lighthouse and the house anchor also look like the Fibonacci circle. There's all kinds of rules of composition. Again, use AI. Ask what the rules of composition in photography are, and you'll see all these different. That's the golden mean. That's also an important part of it. I have a program on photography composition where we talk about all those different things. All right, any other questions, comments, any thoughts? Anybody want to add to it, or anybody want to tell their stories about a bad judge or a good judge?
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned AI sharpening.
Yes.
And could you explain what you meant? Because there's
Yeah.
a lot of different sharpening methods just in Photoshop, and I don't know what's AI sharpening.
Yeah, so third-party programs like Topaz On One, um, um, what's the other one? Luminar. They have programs that use AI sharpening. My personal favorite, and I think it seems to be the most popular one, is Topaz Pro or Topaz AI sharpening.
Yeah.
What it does is it does all the figuring out for you. It figures out what part of the picture needs to be sharpened. It figures out what part of the picture needs noise reduction. And it has a perfect graduation from the sharpened area to the not sharpened area. And what it's doing is evaluating the pixels in your picture, and it's using AI technology to sharpen it better. The way I used to sharpen, I don't even remember, like because I haven't used it in so long, but I used to either use Unsharp Mask or Smart Sharpen. Okay, but you to do that, you really have to select the right subject. What part of the picture do you want sharp? Right? With these AI ones, it knows what you want sharp. It figures out your main subject. You could change it if it picks the wrong main subject, but it does a much smoother job of sharpening. All right, so I highly recommend Topaz AI. Or I think they does anybody know? I think it's Topaz Photo Pro or something.
It's photo AI.
Yeah, Photo AI. Yeah,
Hmm.
because I don't think they support the sharpening and the noise reduction anymore. You could still use it, but I don't think they support it. So, um, but man, that program, in my opinion, is revolutionary. I had used on one sharpening, I had used Nick sharpening, I had used Luminar sharpening, but man, nothing does a good a job as that. They also have a new module in there. It's called Super Focus. And if your picture is really out of focus, I shouldn't say really, if it's a little bit out of focus, um, it'll bring it pretty close to focus. It does a really good job of it.
Yeah,
So
it's horribly slow though. Gosh.
yeah, you really need a fast computer for it.
Yeah.
My laptop that I use is pretty fast, so it does do it pretty fast. But when I go to my desktop, the computer I'm on right now, you know, it's like go get a cup of coffee while it's sharpening.
I go grocery shopping.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Do we have any judges in your club?
No,
Our
we don't.
club, yeah, the club used to judge our monthly competitions within the club, but then we were lucky enough to start getting outside judges from all around the country,
Yeah.
which has been so much better because after you see so many images from the same photographer, you get to the point where you recognize
Yeah.
whose image it is
Yeah.
before you get a chance to judge it.
Yeah. I agree. That's always a bit of a problem. Um,
But it's worked out good.
yeah. Yeah. On that note, I also would just want to say that, I know um, you guys found me through hunts. I don't know where you buy your equipment, but 90% of what I buy is from hunts. They're, I don't know if anybody's ever purchased things from hunts, but they're really awesome. They're in Massachusetts, but they ship anywhere. They have really great people working there. If you call them up and have a question, I always like to give the example. Me and my friend Dave were in Olympic National Park, and it was the first night, and we had got there, we had some dinner, and we said, "Oh, let's just go out and just shoot some pictures." And we were on this bridge, and he was taking a picture, and he dropped his camera off the bridge.
Oh,
And it crashed down into the water way too far for us to go get it. And we text Gary from Hunt's Photo. By 1 o'clock the next day, he had a new camera sitting at the hotel desk. That's how
Great service.
that's really good service. They really, really take care of you there. So, um, somebody said that's the biggest fear I have. So, if you ever want to go to the Nick Palmieri School of Photography, you're going to learn how to break cameras. I definitely have insurance because I have broken more cameras, dropped more cameras, submerged more cameras. We used to have a Canon factory warehouse center not in New Jersey, not too far from where I lived. And it's the big factory, but they have this little kind of office where you could go in, and if your camera broke, they'll fix it there or whatever, or you can get your camera cleaned. And it's not there anymore. They moved it to Virginia, I think. But the second I walked in, the first thing they would do is be like, "What did you do? Like what now?" Like I've had cameras where they're right on it, submerged or impact damage, or you know. So yeah, it's a fear. It's a fear, but have insurance on your camera. If you go on an expensive trip, when possible, take two cameras. You just never know what's going to happen. You don't want your trip to be ruined because you dropped your camera off a bridge or you submerged your camera in a river or something.
Nick, do you have
Anything
a
else?
favorite? Do you have a favorite genre? You showed a lot of different photos. Is there one or two favorite genres you like to shoot?
I just like taking pictures. I go through different stages. I mean, listen, I really think if I had to pick one thing, I love shooting waterfalls. I don't think there were any waterfalls in this thing, but waterfalls is probably my number one. Landscape, birds, animals. I like shooting people. Um, I go through my stages of macro, where all of a sudden I'll just keep doing macro, 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 and then all of a sudden I won't do it again for another year or two. So, yeah, I don't have a favorite. If I had to pick one, I'd pick waterfalls.
I'll tell you, I went and look at your website, those calla lilies, the
Oh
red
yeah,
ones where they're like mirror images of each other.
yeah.
Gorgeous.
So it's really funny that you say that. We just had our bathroom in our house remodeled, and my wife wanted those calla lily pictures printed for the wall. Yeah, those are good pictures. I like those too. I go through my flower. I go through my flower phases too. I like it all, whatever I'm doing. I've helped my friends do weddings. I've done weddings and people. I've done sports stuff. I've done a lot of different stuff. And yeah, please visit my website and you know, hopefully you'll enjoy it. Anything else?
You did a very good presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
Very
it.
good. We enjoyed it.
Good. I'll check out about judging, because then you're going to have a different opinion of me once I judge.
Well, if October opens up for you, we'll have submitted pictures after this presentation, so we won't have any excuses not
So
to
I'll
follow
expect
the
all
guideline.
perfect. I'll expect to give it all top scores. All right.
Yeah, the next day after competition, we all critique the judge.
Yeah, of course.
So
We always give it a 20, like me and my friend Ben used to give it a 24-hour rule. It's like no matter what, after 24 hours, we're going to forget it. We're not going to
Hold on to
we're
it.
not going to trash the judge anymore. We've trashed them enough. Listen, it's easy. And just don't forget that judges make mistakes. There's times when I can give you an example today. I teach at a university. I've been teaching all day. So now all of a sudden I'm looking at pictures tonight and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm really tired. And sometimes you just make mistakes and judges make mistakes. So if that happens, then just put it in the next competition, see how it does. That's all. And
that's one thing I often do is take the judge's ideas on how to improve the image,
Yep.
and I'll follow his suggestions and re-enter it, and then lo and behold, the next judge finds other things that would improve the image.
Yeah, or he says, why did you do that to the image?
I know. Yeah, I
You
had
made
one
it
real
darker, and the new judge
recently.
says, "Oh, well, wow, that's too dark. You should lighten it." And you lighten the pictures; it's too light. It's also how that image projects. You know, how does it look on that screen? I mean, when I competed, like there'd be days where I knew my image was perfect exposure, and it goes up on the screen, and I'm like, "What the heck? That doesn't even look like my picture." And I'm like, if I was judging, I'd give it a bad score. But when I put it in, it was the top score. You know, something happened. But yeah, if you want any other programs, I have a bunch of programs, and I'd be glad to come back to your club. That was fun. So thank you all for having me.
Thank
Enjoy-
you again for some great information.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Nick, and thank you also to Gary
We
Farber
appreciate
with
it.
Hunts for helping us connect with you.
Yeah, and like I said, anytime.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good
Thanks.
evening.
All right, take care.
Nick, Nick.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh, I thought I was going to talk to
Peace
him.
out.
He's
out.
you can email him on his website. His email address is there if you had another question.
Is he going to
That was
judge for
great.
us or not?
Well, Debbie's going to follow up with him and find out.
Oh, but what did he indicate to you?
Well, before we started tonight, he said October was tough because he's normally out shooting foliage and leaves and landscapes, but if he could work it in. So I said, well, I don't know all the particulars, the timing and how they get submitted to you or how long you have to do it or whatever, but Debbie's going to email you, so he's expecting a follow up from you.
All right. Do you
I-
think he charges? Because we don't
Huh?
pay. Does
I
he
don't know.
charge?
Yeah, we didn't get into that.
Woo. Okay.
He charged for tonight, but I don't know
Well,
about
yeah,
I don't know about judging.
we don't pay our judges, so I just, I maybe.
Eh, The guy
Anyway,
seems to love
I can
photography.
find
Just throw it
out.
out there to him and see what he says.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Say, Mike or Julie, hey, I missed the first part of the meeting. If